you see the words H.P. Lovecraft, I think about the Elder Gods, Cthulhu, the Old Ones, the gripping insanity that drives everyone and everything into despair. What I don't think is kick-ass resistance fighters from the future sent back in time to stave off the Elder Gods' apocalypse. Now that doesn't sound like Lovecraft. The creeping sensation that is brought on by just the presence of the elders. The gripping tentacles that send you insane, not by physical touch, but by gripping your grey matter until you are brought to extinction by your own hand, or by the creatures that they bring.
So, we're talking about a new tabletop role-playing game that come out in the last year or late last year called Fate of Cthulhu. It is brought to you by a company called Evil Hat Productions. Evil Hat Productions is a company that produces role-playing games. Chief among them is the free indie RPG Fate, which has won numerous awards. In 2005, the company began producing a series of commercial role-playing games using an updated version of the Fate system, each focusing on a completely different genre. And that's brought to you by Wiki, which you'll probably see on the screen. And what I've just described earlier was a actual format of which they're going with the new Cthulhu. As instead of being what it would be is you are either an investigator or a civilian of some kind, trapped in a spiraling point of insanity brought on by these creatures that can't be fathomed by the human mind, into a fighting game, a action combat game, because they've completely missed the point of what Cthulhu and Lovecraft is. But they have reminded us that H.P. Lovecraft happened to be racist or normal in the 1930s, as it would have when it was written. So in this tweet, they show that while developing the Fate of Cthulhu game, we are obligated to reflect on the problematic roots of the source material. We tackle this on page 6. The mythos is definitely worth exploring and worth re-examining. Well, of course, it's fantastic mythos, but in the zoomed-in picture, they focused on the content and consent of the game, and consent being your consent in playing. I will read out this rule now. Fate of Cthulhu is a game that deals with many hard topics, including mental health, systematic abuses of power, and deaths of huge portions. Of the human species. Make sure that all players are aware of these things and give enthusiastic consent before they begin playing. Wow. As if anyone with a smidgen of knowledge didn't know that already. Also, Howard Phillips Lovecraft was a racist and an anti-Semite. Wow. As if we didn't know. So basically, we are so stupid we need to be reminded that he was someone in the 1930s. He wasn't exactly the nicest person in the world, and in fact it's been found that he was trying to be less racist later in life, and he even married a Jewish woman. Ooh, that's a strange anti-Semite there. Lovecraft once said, "The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear. Of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is the fear of the unknown," which is the perfect reiteration of Lovecraft. Works, because he said it, mainly. But when they made the game, that completely went over their head. Because they were so focused on the fact that he might have been a racist back then, they had to add this at the bottom. In the recent years, many writers, including writers of colour, have flipped the perspective on some of Lovecraft's most famous stories and made brilliant new works. Excellent examples are blah blah blah. I don't care. You can say people have made works later on, but I don't care what the skin color is. I don't care what gender they are. If they write good, they write good. And I will read their books. If they do it well, that's fine. If they do it shit and you're just promoting them due to their color, you're the racist. You know what I mean? It's stupid. But moving on. What we have here is not a Cthulhu-built game. It is a game with another idea in mind, another IP, slapped with a coat of Cthulhu green. I don't even know if that's a real green. I may look it up. The description here was very quickly discovered by people, and it was kind of obvious when you read the kick-ass resistance fighter from the future part. Because while that does describe a lot of things, it amply describes the Terminator series of a resistance fighter coming from the future to save Sarah Connor and all that, and her babies, and John Connor, who is a little shit, but it's Terminator 1 and 2 are the best, in my opinion. Can't take that. There's no other films that compare. Joking. But this tweet, and if you think Fate of Cthulhu doesn't sound like traditional Lovecraftian horror, you're right. That territory is well trodden and amply covered by other games. The advantage of a shared universe is you can play in your corner of the sandbox and we can play in ours. While I am not going to disagree on the idea that you can play however you like, doesn't give you the right to shit on people. In Dungeons & Dragons, I'm going to use this as it's a well-known example and most people understand what I'm saying. You can play almost whatever the fuck you like. The only limitation is A, your imagination, and B, if the Dungeon Master says it's okay. And if the Dungeon Master says no, either change it or dial it down so it's agreeable. Most of this is built on the woke factor. Because, yeah, I'm aware that in the 1930s, people were a bit shit to other people who were different than them. That happens. People who find other people different are always going to be shit to one another in most cases. And I'm only talking about the extreme ones here. Because right now, it's not about the person that is the issue. Often enough, it's an uncontrollable factor of the person's life that makes them completely unable to have an opinion according to certain cults on the internet. For example, I could be a straight white male. I could be someone of colour. But you don't know who I am because you haven't seen my face. But you're going to make an opinion and then probably assume I'm going to be one of the other, and most likely the former of those. What gives that away? Well, my accent, for one thing. My accent tells me that I am from England. So that narrows it down to maybe one or two types of people. I'm aware of the democratic in England, and I will talk about that in another video. But either way, that is my point. But moving on, we are going to talk about something else. Vice has actually made an article about this. You can see in this tweet, Evil Hat Productions tweeted this. The recent Vice article about content and consent warnings includes more insight to how we have attempted to handle the more problematic aspects of mythos roots and material, while at the same time creating a game that's welcoming and inclusive. Welcoming and inclusive. There is nothing wrong with games nowadays. Games are always, and have always been, welcoming and inclusive. Don't know why? It's the players that make things unwelcoming and uninclusive. We have things now where people want their own space for things. That's fine. But when you get to a point that you have to have spaces dedicated to certain demographics or certain aspects of their demographic that some cases are completely uncontrollable, you have a problem because now you're splitting yourself away from other potential friends, potential game mates, potential rivals. And that's not good. That's unhealthy. For example, we have got things such as LGBTQ spaces only. We've got LGBTQ spaces of colour only. We've got LGBTQ spaces of a certain demographic, maybe African American, maybe Asian, maybe Chinese, whatever. You know what I mean? It's becoming that they put themselves into smaller and smaller demographics so they can feel special. And this game, I'm using this game as a thing to get a point across, but this game is not a game for you to feel special. This game is for you to feel helpless. You have to make decisions, and often those decisions turn out to be a bad idea due to the fact that the game's atmosphere. But when you make a game that isn't Lovecraft, you change the entire demographic of the game. Yeah, you can shoot tentacle monsters, that's really cool. But it's not Lovecraft. It's nowhere near Lovecraft, and it never will be Lovecraft if you're able to kill them. You can't kill the Elder Gods, the old ones, the other ones. You can only stop them from being where you are temporarily or permanently. That is the whole point. You are not able to fight majority of the monsters I've seen in the game book known as Call of Cthulhu. I've looked at them, and most of them are more than 8 to 20, between 8 and 100 feet, and it's honestly terrifying how they are made, and they look really cool. I want to get a hold of those books. I'm just going to steal it off my mate and look it over again. But that's it. So let's get into the Vice article itself. So we move on to the Vice article that I just spoke about, and what the first thing you see is a Terminator unit. It is a female Terminator unit, which I'm not denying that they exist. It's just Arnold is the best Terminator of all time, and you can't take that away from him. With very visible scarring up here, a red glowing eye, a shotgun, a motorcycle, and a Cthulhu-style monster in the corner. What I'm seeing is not a Cthulhu game. I'm seeing Terminator v Cthulhu, the ultimate battle. We scroll down a little bit, and we move from how tabletop RPGs are being reclaimed from bigots and jerks. Now, the last time I checked, I'm not a bigot, but I'm a little bit of a dick. But you'll find dickheads in every single hobby, and most often these dickheads are the ones imported from other hobbies or that have come outside the hobby and have decided that they want to change what the hobby is so it suits them. And honestly, that is disgusting. Why would you do that? If something works, why change it? Is sometimes the answer that I should give. Matthew Galt. Oh, God, he's got that name. How dare he have a name similar to mine? I shouldn't be saying this because I'm trying to hide my name. It doesn't matter. I actually don't care. If you find out who I am, good for you. Hello. But new rulebooks and designers' notes are making horror RPGs a more inclusive and healthy hobby. There's that word, a special word, inclusive. Games have always been inclusive. Dungeons & Dragons has always been inclusive because it does not matter who you are, where you're from. If you know how to roll dice and you know how to roleplay, or if you don't like roleplaying, you like wargaming, you can play the game. You can go in and be whatever you want. But I've already said this once. It's sometimes I feel like I have to repeat the thing in order to get it out there. So when roleplaying, when tabletop roleplaying, when tabletop roleplaying game developer Evil Hat Productions announced that it had included a content warning on page 6 of its recently released Fate of Cthulhu game. Many folks praised Evil Hat, but there was also the now predictable tide of hateful bullshit, of which here it is. Here's the thing, I showed you it earlier, and they've actually gone and been very sad about the content and consent thing. Oh wow, people are upset about it because you didn't need it. The fact that people find it absolutely necessary these days to include consent rules of things that are outside of what's necessary. For example, I consent to playing this game. Do you know how I consent to playing this game? By being fucking there. Oh, I don't like X, Y, and Z. In fact, if I remember rightly, there is a D&D consent form. Sorry, I have my microphone in the way, and it's rather there it is. First thing. No, it's not what I want. It's this. What is this bullshit? You don't need this, because if you feel unsafe, you're alright to just mention, well, I don't like this. And if the DM or the DM master goes, well, who cares? You're welcome to just walk away. For example, let's have a look at this. GM name, player name, game plan, theme name. That standard stuff. If this game was a movie, what the rating should be. Who cares? It's a game, you make it how it is. Mark the colour that illustrates your comfort. Green, enthusiastic. Bring it on! Yellow. Okay if failed or off stage. What if, like, you're fighting something, so everything that you fight has to be off stage now? Red. Hardline. Do not include. I don't need this in my life. I am triggered by it. I hate that too. But it's basic things. Bug, blood, demons, eyeballs. If you don't want them to describe things in too heavy detail, just say, yeah, please no. Or walk away. You have the power. You've got legs in most cases. You have the ability to say no. Relationships. Okay. I can understand when people get attached to characters in-game and then maybe have a romance or a friendly rivalry, or in fact a companionship, like a partnership of like battle partners and shit. But what is homophobia, racism, real world religion, sexism, specific cultural issues? What? Oh, sorry, my mouse. You can still use these as really good stories. If your GM is that pathetic to allow you to make you fill this out, I would walk away. The GM is that weak. I mean, I can understand when it comes to people you don't know. You don't usually bring out the big guns straight away. Okay, so today we're going to start a game where you're fighting Nazis that really want to wipe out people of certain places. If you just want to start by playing as a black character, that would be great. No one does that. No one in their right mind does that. Mental and physical health. Cancer, claustrophobia. I'm claustrophobic. I don't give a shit. If it's not the real me and it's in the character, I know how it feels. Therefore, I can add to the role-playing. Freezing to death. That's terrifying. Gaslighting. Real thing that happens. Genocide. Well, there goes 90% of the Dark Lord's plans. Heatstroke. It's a possible story. Natural disasters. Well, that goes most of the way of the Dark Lord's plans. Paralysis and physical restraint. There goes half of the spells. Police and police aggression. Your basic. If someone put red in all of those, that would be the most boring game of D&D in my ever. Most boring game of any tabletop ever. But moving on. So they added the tweet here with the consent and content. And we move on. Racism, fear of the unknown, powered Lovecraft's work. It's not a bug, it's a feature. Yeah, and Skyrim hasn't been released for about 6 to 8 times. It's not racism that Lovecraft uses. It's possible to separate the author from his work, but apparently these people can't. It's usually a certain leaning on the political scale that have an issue with people who have held different views from a different time. It's difficult for them to understand that back then, people had these views, and it wasn't okay now. It's not okay now, but back then, it was a thing. The responses were predictable. Thousands of people replied to the tweet. Some praised Evil Hat's decision, while others logged on to defend Lovecraft from criticism and heap scorn on Evil Hat for daring to point out that the racist was racist. Since the predictable edgelords and apologists have now shown up, Evil Hat set in response a quick reminder. If you don't like the politics included in our games, don't buy them. We literally do not want your money. We are committed to diverse and inclusive gaming. We're not perfect, but are trying. So, I would say, a quick reminder. We want to force our politics into these things where it isn't really needed. We don't want your money because you might be awful. So bye. Fuck you. Tabletop RPGs are an intimate experience, the most true thing Vice has ever said. Players and game masters collaborate to tell a story. Some of those stories can include themes of violence, sex, and any number of horrors, both supernatural and banal. Banal? Whatever. Oh, normal. Increasingly, game designers are including guides and content warnings to help players navigate these themes responsibly. Why? The problem with these people, actually, before I say this, but players and designers say that content warnings and mature playing guides are working as intended. Gatekeeping bad elements of the community and providing framework. They're doing gatekeeping in a different way. They're gatekeeping common sense. And I should really hold this for a different discussion, but when you add trigger warnings and content warnings on everything, it makes people more worried about potential content in the future. So when something doesn't have a warning in advance, it upsets them because they don't know what's coming. For example, most novels do not contain a trigger warning. Most novels have a blurb instead, so you have an idea of what's going on and what might happen. And that's acceptable. But and now everyone starts putting a trigger warning. Warning contains violence and rape and all of that. Wow, now you're making everyone paranoid because people are like, hang on, this other thing I'm reading doesn't have a warning. It never warned me to what's coming. Now I feel like... Tabletop RPGs are intimate experiences. Yes, we know. Violence and sex, they all happen. Increasingly, game designers are including game guides and content warnings to help players navigate these themes responsibly. I had to take a minute and have a coffee to calm down because I was starting to get a bit riled up. That's good. That's good shit. Evil Hat Productions, go away, Vice. I don't want to talk. Fuck you, Vice. You suck. Evil Hat Productions recently told me that they felt it was important to create distance between themselves and Lovecraft. You mean like everyone else can do? Evil Hat is committed to creating games that are welcoming and inclusive. And so we stop saying welcoming and inclusive. Just be welcoming because everyone's involved then. If you say inclusive, it means you're specifically catering to a certain set of people. A welcoming and fun community would even be better. No one needs to implicitly endorse the bigoted views of H.P. Lovecraft just because they find value in the seeds of cosmos. Oh my god, they actually said the simple thing that needed to be said. The 1930s were an interesting time where certain groups of people were not exactly seen in the same light as other groups of people, and that was the time then. But you can't use today's standards against his views back then. It's... I'm gonna need... Oh, more coffee. Coffee, good. Coffee's... I've got some sweet, sweet coffee. Just as important as Fate Cthulhu's mature content warning, which encourages game masters to communicate with their players about the hard edges of the game, they seek their enthusiastic consent. So, going, well, yeah, I want to play the game, is not enthusiastic. They need to stand in the middle of the room, and you can hear me saying this, but I consent to this game! Yeah, you know what I mean? It's how fucking stupid they're getting. Everyone is getting offended by everything, and we get to that point where I'm getting offended because they're getting offended, and that's really stupid. No one wants their session to suddenly go sour because the game unexpectedly slips into anxiety-inducing material. Not all tabletop RPGs carry the same emotional weight. There's a big difference between running off with a group of friends through Stormking's Thunder in Dungeons and Dragons, and running through the apocalyptic horror in a Fate. Like, oh, I forgot to mute that. Oh wait, I did. Yes. Vampire Masquerade, edgier than their high fantasy counterparts. The mature themes are built in and aren't used empathetically by players and storytellers. Consent warnings are coming into vogue with these games and are long overdue. No, they're fucking not. Given their mature teams and push players and sometimes when you push a player into an uncomfortable place, they play better. They play differently. These games are not meant to be safe spaces in like the way that they're trying to push. Hang on. I'm seeing the next, paragraph and it's annoying me. When you push your politics, which pushes out every other form of politics, you ruin the things. It's like, this game has always been about anxiety, psychological trauma, and disgusting acts. But this new people who are making the game are taking away most of that. So it's now an action game where no one can die and everyone has a fluffy teddy. Sometimes the best stories push the players into an uncomfortable place. You're not pushing the game person. You're meant to push the characters into an uncomfortable place. If you let that, if a person playing a character starts feeling that, that means the person's doing it right. You can have games that do great things when the characters are in absolute dire straits. But you can do great things when you're not doing it as well. I'm not saying that only games that do bad things are good games. I'm saying that all games can work as long as they're done well. But no, these people want to take away the potential bad things so you don't feel uncomfortable. More coffee. And when everything is all about making people not comfortable, you take away a lot of potential. You stagnate potential shit. And stagnate potential stories because, Joe Blogs, who has not been playing with us for very long, wants us to change the story because he feels like the fascist white supremacist king, which I originally wrote as a elf called Terrandal, who just didn't like humans and had a military thing, now has to be replaced with Trixie, the lovable queen of everyone and loves everything and does not hurt anyone. I'm taking extremes here, but you know what I mean. So, one mention It is possible to play in comfortable places safely. Vampire the Masquerade's 5th edition release made headlines when publisher White Wolf was accused of anti-Semitism, promoting pedophilia, and marketing to neo-Nazis. No, it wasn't. It was actually built to be as woke as possible. Oh wow, this just goes on and on. Jesus Christ. I didn't read this before I started. No, I'm not reading any more of this. I can honestly say that it is shit. Hang on. Did they mention the fucking consent gaming? What is this? Important things about consent. You decide what's safe for you. The default answer is no. It doesn't matter what consent is given. Nobody has to explain why they're not consenting. It may not be the reason why they're not consenting. The spectrum of consent. There is a spectrum of consent for each topic. It is not for what? Oh, it's this fucking checklist again. Oh, fuck this shit. Right. I'm not reading the entirety of that because most of it is just screaming, we don't like a certain type of person, especially when they're playing our game, so we don't want them to buy our game. Even though most of these people are actually considered to be fans of these types of games. I am a huge fan of Cthulhu. I love H.P. Lovecraft's work. But I dislike the fact that he was not that great of a guy. But I also learnt that it was a different time. There were different types of thoughts back then. And that's it. People think differently per year. So in the next, maybe, let's say, 90 years or so, people might be thinking way differently in the future. We might even go back to being massively racist because everyone's just put themselves into stupid boxes. You don't know. We'll see what happens next. But I'm going to leave it here. I've rambled for a long time. Let's just let's bring this up. This is the perfect picture to end it on. This is technically the first official video of this channel. I will be bringing up other things which require me to do a little bit of extra work and find stuff. I do have a gaming channel, which is where I usually post, although I've not posted as much as recently. But if you want to see more of this, or you have a subject for me to talk about, or even if it's just something like a mechanic in a video game, tabletop, role-playing game, I've mostly specialized in games. I've been trying to keep myself somewhat away from politics. I may be talking about Takarov in the next few days or weeks. God knows when I'm posting the next video for this. But I'll see you next time. The Opinionated Warlock, or the Opinion Warlock, which is I, is out.